Hey, greetings everybody. Gleekon here again with another episode of Lore of Warcraft. On the last episode, we saw the prophet approach Jaina after Arthas went crazy in Arthas Rise of the Lich King, and Sheba's now convinced. She's going to try to get people to go to Kalimdor, just like Thrall. And I think they're going to ultimately succeed. All right, so stay a while and listen to this one. It's called The Cursed Blade. I don't know if this is where Arthas is going to get Frostmourne, where he's going to find it. I'm guessing, yeah. Or maybe he's just going to get the awesome replica that is that I just saw promoted on the WoW on BattleNet, where it's $1,500 for just your own Frostmourne. It's awesome. It looks super cool. If someone wanted to send that my way, I would take it. But $1,500, I can't ever imagine I'd be in a situation where I'm like, there's just nothing I can think of better to do than buy the sword. Like, I gotta have money to burn and not be interested in using that on vacation or paying off debt or anything like that. Just buy a sword for a case or something on the wall. It is a sick sword. It's dope. All right, so let's read this one. The Cursed Blade. The culling of Stratholme was the point of no return for Prince Arthas Menethil. His heart had darkened, and his sanity was unraveling. He was almost ready to become the Lich King's greatest servant. Almost. First, Arthas needed to find the cursed runeblade, Frostmourne. The Scourge couldn't simply lead him to it. That would make the prince suspicious. The Lich King turned his attention to dwarf explorers who were trekking across Northrend. Led by the great warrior Muradin Bronzebeard, they had come from the mountain city of Ironforge in search of ancient artifacts. During Arthas' youth, Muradin had served as ambassador to Lordaeron, and he had trained the human in martial combat. He would be the perfect messenger to inform Arthas of Frostmourne. Well, that's a convenient coincidence. He just happens to be there. With the Lich King's guidance, Mal'Ganis and the other Dreadlords manipulated the dwarves. The demons secretly planted clues about Frostmourne and its location in the explorers' encampment, including maps and ancient histories that spoke of a legendary runeblade. None of the dwarves could remember where this information had come from. They assumed that they hadn't noticed it before. The runeblade intrigued Muradin, and the dwarves set out to find it. I mean, you could just imagine, I guess they're being duped. I always just thought Muradin came with Arthas since they were so close, but I guess I was wrong. Meanwhile, Arthas and his soldiers made landfall in a region of Northrend called the Howling Fjord. The wintry conditions were harsh, and the Scourge were mysteriously evasive, a far departure from their aggressive tactics in Lordaeron. And that makes sense too if you look at the map we read in the manual that shows them landing there. The Lich King used the Scourge to attack Muradin Bronzebeard and herd him toward Arthas. When the dwarf and the prince finally crossed paths, it seemed like nothing more than a chance meeting, and a fortuitous one at that. Muradin told Arthas of his purpose in Northrend, and of his more recent quest to find Frostmourne. The story of the blade enticed the prince. It could prove useful in the fight against Mal'Ganis. Also in Howling Fjord, this is a part of the lore I'm a little more familiar with, because you can basically have like these flashback memory quest line to get Muradin, and he relives this stuff in Wrath of the Lich King expansion. Arthas' hopes swelled only to be crushed by news from Lordaeron. A royal emissary tracked down the prince and delivered orders from King Taranis. Arthas and his soldiers were to return to Lordaeron immediately. As much as the prince's loyalists wanted to stay by his side, disobeying the king's command would amount to treason. Arthas knew that if he turned back now, he might never have another opportunity to find Mal'Ganis. He saw only one recourse. In secret, he burned his own ships. Every one of them. None of his soldiers knew that their prince was responsible for it. They had no choice but to remain in Northrend, at least until they could construct more vessels. With the prince and his forces trapped, Mal'Ganis and the Scourge attacked en masse. The undead came in numbers Arthas had never seen before, and they threatened to overwhelm his soldiers. His only hope was to seek out another power. Frostmourne. As the prince's forces held the Scourge at bay, Arthas and Muradin tracked the runeblade to a small cavern. There, suspended within a block of gleaming ice, hung the sword. The blade radiated not only power, but also something ominous and otherworldly. Muradin urged Arthas to leave Frostmourne be, but the prince could not. He had come too far to turn back now. The Lich King sensed Arthas' determination. Energy burst out from Frostmourne, shattering its icy prison in a violent explosion. Jagged shards shot across the cavern, one of which impaled Muradin and struck him down. Arthas rushed to heal his friend. Though the holy light had been fickle and unreliable in the Eastweald, it answered the prince's call. The scintillating energy coursed over Arthas and flared bright at his fingertips. All he needed to do was embrace it. But he did not. His thoughts turned to Frostmourne and its promise of salvation. The blade held true power. It was the key to defeating Mal'Ganis, not the light. After all, what good had the prince's holy power done him back in the Eastweald? It hadn't stopped the undead. It hadn't saved all those innocents whom Arthas had watched die before his eyes. In that moment, Arthas Menethil forever turned his back on the light and took hold of Frostmourne. Its terrible power surged through him. It chilled his veins to ice. It devoured his soul. Through Frostmourne, the Lich King could now speak in Arthas' mind and guide his actions. He did not yet transform the prince into his slave. For the time being, he allowed Arthas to believe that he was in control of his own fate. Arthas had one last act to perform before he took his place among the Scourge. Muradin's fate. Despite what Arthas Menethil believed, the ice shard that struck Muradin Bronzemeteor didn't kill him. It had only knocked him unconscious. After Arthas left the cavern, Muradin awoke. His wounds were grave, and he had no memory of who he was or why he had come to Northrend. Muradin wandered the snowy wastes on the verge of collapse. He would have died if not for the intervention of the Frostmourne, a faction of dwarves who called Northrend home. The Frostmourne discovered the injured dwarf and later nursed him back to health. It would be many years before Muradin recovered his memories and returned to Ironforge. Yeah, not until the Wrath of the Lich King expansion. Okay. This is a good telling of just his descent, Arthas' descent, and how someone who comes from a noble and heroic background could become the Lich King. I like it. I'm assuming we're going to read the novelization, an even cooler, more detailed version pretty much next time. All right, this episode's in the pipe, 5x5. I thank everybody so much for watching and listening, and we will see each other. Well, you'll see me next time on Lore of Warcraft.